Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the concession stand here on the KB Radio Network. I am your host, Kevin Reed, and this is the review of the brand new HBO Max series, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. Yes, it is the third TV show that is a adaptation of George R.R. Martin's Game of Thrones. We get our third series from this writer, and this is an adaptation of the Tales of Duncan Egg series of novellas that spawned off from a Song of Ice and Fire franchise. And this show tells the tale of Ser Duncan the Tall, or Dunk, and his squire Egg, or Aegon Targaryen. They are both played by Peter Claffey, who plays Dunk, and Dexter Sol Ansell, who plays Egg. And this takes place before the Game of, well, yeah, it's a prequel to Game of Thrones, and it's after House of the Dragon, and so it falls right in that little space. And this show, I was wondering how it was going to hit, because this is a tonally different show from House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones. This show, even though set in the same world, universe, however you want to call it, it it has more comedy elements. It's more levity to this show. And so I was wondering, how would that work in such a dark and heavy show as Game of Thrones is and House of the Dragon? Uh, will it fit? Well, only one episode in, I can't really say yay or nay at this point, but it is an interesting start to this show. I had my questions, of course, going into it, and being a big fan of Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, I was kind of worried. It will it be too much of a departure from the tone that was set with those two shows? And I think the tone works. We still got that heavy, dark, kind of gray scale feel throughout this episode, but there are moments of levity. There aren't. It isn't a Saturday Night Live sketch adaptation. It isn't that type of comedy. It isn't a parody, and that's what I was kind of worried about. Now, like I said, only one episode in, it could completely go off the rails, but uh my worries were kind of dashed away. Yeah, there's comedy elements in it. uh our lead character, Duncan the Tall, or Dunk, he's kind of goofy, but he isn't overly goofy. He isn't just a Dumb and Dumber version of Game of Thrones. He's a man. He's a good man, and he's trying to, well, I don't know if he's good or not, but he is a man who is just trying to survive in this world, and he's a little goofy, that's all. And then we got the Egg character, or Aegon Targaryen, who has a lot of backstory with him as well. Of course, he's a Targaryen, so that he's tied to the family. He's actually in the lineage to be king. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, he does eventually become king. I haven't read the books, so I'm only going off of what I have gathered thus far, watching Game of Thrones and watching House of the Dragon and piecing together some clues. But yeah, there's something there. But he's a squire right now under Dunk. So those characters will play a big part in the storytelling of Game of Thrones later on, or what we've seen. And we've heard them mention in Game of Thrones. I remember that, and it's crazy. I remember that. I I've gotten to the age now that my mind doesn't retain a lot of stuff. And so when I do remember things from TV shows or even in life in general, I celebrate it like, oh my God, I remember that. I remember Duncan the Tall being mentioned in Game of Thrones. And I celebrated that because I can barely remember where I put my car keys from yesterday, but I remembered that. It's amazing, man. I can remember this stuff. It that has no bearing on my life in general, but it just goes to show you how immersed I am in TVs and movies. I that is my life, I guess you could say. But as far as the show is concerned, this episode, which is entitled "The Hedge King" or "The Hedge Knight," I should say, it starts off with a kind of a gloomy feel. We start off with a funeral in a sense, or a burial of this guy, and we see our lead character Dunk burying this man who we assumed is his father. Puts him in a shallow grave, and you know immediately you knew what type of show this was when he was kind of speaking to his dead father or father figure. But we later find out that it isn't his actual biological father. It's just somebody who uh, 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 took him in, and he became the squire of this knight. And he's he's talking to him like, "Oh, you only beat me when you had to." And then we get the flashbacks of all of the backhand slaps and the punches to the face and all this here, and it was done in a comedic way. And I'm like, okay, this is where we're going. This is where we're going. And for me, it worked because it was no point dragging on the comedy element. There was no point trying to hide the fact that there's going to be a lot of comedic moments throughout this show, and to mix it in with this gloomy scene that we're in. I mean, you can't get more depressing than a funeral, an actual burial of somebody. I mean, that's the low of the low. And to break it with this comedy in this flashback, I was like, okay, I can work with this. I can actually work with this because it got a few chuckles out of me. And so he buries him. The next morning, he has the sword, and he's thinking about going to become a knight or work for the guard in King's Landing. And we get the theme, and once again, a great moment. The not the old, but the Game of Thrones theme. Dun, 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 dun. It just started playing, and I'm like, okay. And then he stops, and as he's looking, you're thinking he's focused. He's like, oh yes, this is what I gotta do. Is this triumphant theme that's playing? And then we cut to him taking a dump behind a tree. It was, I'm like, okay. And the music cuts. It is like, this is perfect, man. I love where this is going. I wasn't expecting for this. I wasn't expecting the comedy to be like this, just real world comedy, not forced comedy. And so at that moment, Donk thinks about going and participating in this tournament of knights, and he looks at this raven, or not a raven, but a robin that is in a tree that he's pooping behind. And he comes with the bright idea to participate in this. So he goes to an inn, or a hotel, motel, Holiday Inn, whatever, and he sees this little bald young boy coming out of the stables, and he assumed that he's a stable boy, and orders him to take the horses and prep them to leave after he goes get a drink and whatnot. So he goes in there, and he comes back. The young boy is playing with the armor and whatnot, and he kind of scolds him, fusses at him, and The young boy offers to be his squire, to accompany him to Ashfield. That's the town where they're going to hold this tournament, um, to assist him. And of course, Dunk denies it and goes on to his merry way. He arrives in Ashford. He tries to enlist into this tournament, and he's being denied because he's not a rightful knight. And he's trying to explain that he's been knighted by his father, who was a knight. He served under why the name escaping me, but he served as a knight and knighted him before he died. We didn't see this happen, and I don't think it happened, but that's his story, and he's sticking to it. And nobody believes him. He's trying to find the guy that his father served under, or the son of, or whatever the case may be, to vouch for him, because he needs somebody to vouch for him in order to participate in this tournament. Now, the tournament, if you lose the tournament, you lose everything. You lose your sword, your armor, and your horses, and you have to ransom it back. And he can't afford to do that. But the risk is worth well, at least, how can I word it? The reward is worth the risk. That's how I want to say it. And so he is determined to be a part of this. He befriends another knight who tries to belittle him at first, but they end up becoming friends and whatnot. And the rest, as they say, is history. He meets or he reconnects with Egg. He finds Egg has found his way to Ashford, and he scolds him for coming and why are you here and whatnot. And the two end up drawing an alliance with one another, to the point where Dunk agrees to take Egg under his wing as his squire, and promise to treat him better than what his knight did to him. With the beatings, he promised he'll never beat him, and treat him like a human being. And so, as they slept under this tree, Egg notices a shooting star, and he calls it good luck. He like, this is good luck that the shooting star is smiling on us. And Dunk asks him, is it just for us though? And that's how the episode goes off. I thought this was a good start to the show. I honestly wasn't expecting to enjoy it. I really went into it like, I don't think this is going to work. Everything about the whole concept behind this, I just felt like it wasn't going to work. And I feel confident that this is going to work for some strange reason. I really have no dog in this hunt. Honest to God, I forgot this show was even coming out. That's how invested I was in this show. It wasn't until the weekend of, that I realized it, and I only realized it because I saw advertisement for it that is premiering Sunday. And I'm like, oh, it just so happened it was nothing on Sunday night. So I went ahead and peeped it out. And I was pleasantly surprised. I enjoyed it. I think what's his name? Peter Claffey. I think he's a fine. I haven't seen him in nothing else, but the dude is tall. That dude is like 6'5". So they had to find a tall actor, of course, to play this role. But I love how he's playing this character. He's so down to earth. He's like you and me. You know what I'm saying? It's not. He's not being funny or comedic for comedic sake. He's just an average, ordinary guy. We're so used to seeing these, I hate to say over the top characters, but they're over the top characters. There's nobody you would meet in real life when it comes to Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon, because all we see are hierarchies. We see princes and kings and knights and all this other stuff. We barely get to see the middle or lower class of Westeros. So this is as lower class as you can get here. And those people exist. They exist in this time, and we're getting their perspective. And so for that reason, I enjoyed it. I'm curious to see how this is going to play out with Aragon or Egg, because he is destined for bigger things, greater things in the world of Game of Thrones. And so how is that going to affect Dunk? How is that going to affect their friendship that we're going to see develop throughout this show? Is a lot there. And so for that reason, I'm all in on this. I went into this episode saying, look, if they can't get me on this episode, I'll just wait till House of the Dragon come out and to get my Game of Thrones fix. But this is a good show to hold me over until we reach that pinnacle moment. What did you think of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms? Did you enjoy it? Did you think it was left field from what we know and love of Game of Thrones, or did you think this was a pretty fitting show to fit in between all of the madness that we get on the quote unquote main shows of Game of Thrones? I would love to know your thoughts. Email the show, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. You can also search for the show on all social media platforms. Just search for the KB Radio Network. Also, don't forget about YouTube. Subscribe to the KB Radio Network channel and like this video if you don't mind. Don't forget about the 5 stars, the reviews, and sharing this show if you're listening to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you are currently listening to the concession stand here on the KB Radio Network. Everybody, thank you for joining me for this review of the first episode, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, currently on HBO Max. Want you all to know that I love you, continue to love everyone, and until we speak again, you all be blessed.